and welcome to the Kastrat Podcast, where we come together to discuss ideas, spark innovation, and inspire one another. I'm Audrey, your host for today's episode, and joining me is Ravindra, the head of the Strategic Studies Division in PPIG Groningen, who will help us have this conversation and podcast. Today, we're tackling a critical topic about budget cuts in higher education. How do we manage reduced funding, set priorities, and still push forward with creative solutions? To delve into this issue, we've invited two fantastic guests, Maria, Student Council of University of Groningen, and one of the Lijst Calimero candidates, Savas. Say hi, guys.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, guys.
All right. First, we would like to say thank you so much, Maria and Savas, for coming to this podcast. And we would like to ask you how you're doing and how's your studies and what has been on top of your mind since these past budget cuts in higher education discussions began.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us. We are honored to be here. And regarding budget cuts, it has been an ongoing conversation that we've been dealing with for a year now in council. And it is very stressful because we want to make sure that you have the quality of the education that you signed up for coming into Groningen. And we are hoping that despite the bad financial situation it puts the university at, we will still be able to maintain the quality and the life that Bruch could offer us. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I might be a candidate right now for Lijst Calimero, but I'm also currently a faculty council member in the Faculty of Arts. So I can say also on the faculty level that the budget cuts have been an ongoing discussion that has really affected us and that really has put our education at risk. And of course, we don't want to compromise, which is why we are here at the elections trying to fight it.
Okay, yeah. And Ravindra, what do you think about the ongoing discussions, and you as a student, what do you feel about the budget cuts?
Yeah, me as just a regular student who's not, part of any student councils. Well, the first time I've heard of this budget cut was actually from my colleagues, who's a PhD student, and he mentioned that he got reduced allowances from the university. And to me, that's something quite odd because usually they were quite generous with the allowances. Now suddenly they were cut out. But that was probably a few months ago. So I don't know how things have progressed ever since then, or maybe about what type of conversation people are talking about aside from just reduced allowance and higher tuition fees and so on. So that's why I'm excited to have you guys here to just talk about these general things, especially to someone like me who's not quite involved on this conversation and stuff.
Right, so you guys are in the student council, right? So what is the role of the student council in the university? What is their role? What are you guys involved in this topic?
I think first maybe it would be good to clarify that there's two types of councils on two different levels in Rug, but overall in the universities all over the Netherlands. And what this entails is that each faculty has their own faculty council, and that council deals mainly with faculty matters, but also on implementing some things that go from the university level into the faculty level. And then there's also a university council, which is a bit of a higher level as it encompasses all the faculties. And in that council, you deal with issues that apply to the university overall, no matter whether you are a master's student or a bachelor student or what faculty you're in. All these issues are discussed in university council. So yeah, do you want to add anything?
Not really. I think you covered pretty much what the differences between the two. But may you ask the question again
sorry.
one more time?
What is the role, or what do you guys what does the university council or faculty council contribute to this issue?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, because I got lost while
yeah.
answering. Basically, what we did in University Council this year is when the university was informed about by the Dutch government that there will be budget cuts that will affect the universities, the university by default had to somehow adjust how they function, knowing that they will now get less money than they did before. And this is very important considering that the university gets a lot of subsidies from the Dutch government in order to be able to function properly. Other than like the fees they obtain, they also get a lot of money from the government. And when they learned that that money will be decreased, a lot of strategic changes had to be made in order to be able to adapt. However, you had to balance that out with still ensuring that everything is running smoothly, that you get that they provide the education that they promise to provide, and that students can have as many opportunities here as they possibly can. Which is why it was a topic that has been ongoing in University Council since the beginning of the year. Before we even got the budget outline, we had multiple meetings where we voiced our concerns and opinions as students, which we got one from being students here, but also we had multiple meetings with representatives of the faculty councils and with representatives of different student boards in order to get as much input of students' fears and concerns regarding that matter as possible, especially that with budget cuts, concerns about shutting down programs arise. So we would meet with university representatives. After having the conversations with students, we would meet with university representatives and the finance people and the strategy people, and we would discuss what we want to make sure doesn't happen.
Right, okay. And with these people, with the university representatives and in these meetings, what have all of you decided to prioritize? Is there specific things or lists?
Yes. Overall, it was a general agreement that we want to make the changes as least invasive as possible.
Yeah.
However, it was also a bit hard for most of the year because at first the university didn't get exact criteria of how the budget cuts will be implemented or what you have to do not to have them implemented. So it was like a game of assumption. Of you had to come up with a strategy beforehand just to be able to anticipate it coming. University was kind of lobbying for making sure that the budget cuts don't happen. Plus, a lot of students got involved. There were protests, which Savas took part in. He was part of organizing it, some of them. So if you want to touch on that.
Maybe you can share how that...
Well, yeah, actually, so quite a lot of protests happened, both locally but also nationally, regarding the budget cuts, which both students and staff participated in, which we are very happy about. One of the earliest protests that happened was back in November, where basically a national protest was meant to happen in Utrecht. However, that got cancelled. We were planning also to have a local one to accommodate for all the people that would not be able to make it to Utrecht due to money, work, or looking after their children. And due to the national one getting cancelled, a lot more people attended the local one in Groningen. So we had quite a nice turnout, but also quite recently we had one more protest where we saw a lot of people from the whole university participating and also the unions helping out in facilitating in Grote Markt.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I remember on the day where we had the one of the protests, I had a lecture, and my professor told me, of course, he supports all the students to go protest, so he doesn't mandate any of the students to come to class.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah, and so the class was pretty empty, but he wasn't angry or anything about it because he supports the protests. Yeah. So I have another question for the both of you. So have you seen any concrete effects already? For example, of course, like offering student support services or extracurricular activities that have changed because of the budget cuts?
Well, I can say that on the faculty level, we have for sure seen them already. As a faculty council member in the Faculty of Arts, we have already started taking measures for the budget cuts, for example, right now we want to implement faculty-wide courses for the whole university, for the whole faculty, um, alongside with the cutting of electives, and many other things. It's a long process right now, and it's still ongoing. But these are measures that, during the process, have the possibility of damaging our education. And you might ask, how so? Well, the Faculty of Arts is a very interdisciplinary and diverse faculty. We have 16 bachelors. So by making 5 faculty-wide courses, you are making a very broad, not so specific bachelor, which in the sense then doesn't provide something more, because during that process you are cutting down. You're not adding the faculty-wide courses on top of the normal courses. You are cutting some from the bachelors in order to implement this. And this comes at a risk of making our degrees way too broad and cutting down on specializations.
How about you, Maria? Have you seen it happening in like not just bachelors but like masters or PhD students too?
Yeah. Well, one example is just the fact that the amount of PhD spots or the amount of research spots you can get here have been significantly decreased, strictly because of the budget cuts, because we cannot accommodate as many students. And this is especially problematic as this is a research university in the end. And the PhD research opportunities, if you cut them down by default, then there's less research coming out of the University of Groningen, which then impacts like the standings and like a national level and an international level. So just a small decision, well, a seemingly small decision like this, has like very large and possibly long-term effects. And then in council, the effect of budget cuts is the fact that it is always there. It is something you always have to keep in the back of your mind, and every single decision that is being made, it is also looked at from the sense of like, oh, can we afford this with the budget cuts coming in? Especially, and I also see how a lot of, because something that happened is the faculties had to also cut down their spending costs. So what I see, and we get complaints about it as well, is that there isn't enough teachers because the university can't pay enough because they have to cut down the budget. There's less working groups, less TAs. And then that in the end puts more workload on the teachers that are already here, which negatively affects the education students obtain, even though the teachers are doing their best to provide that education. They are overburdened. It is also like not good work-life balance, because all of a sudden you have one teacher checking 500 exams which have 6 open-ended questions. So it seems like how do I sorry, I kind of get stuck there.
It's fine.
It seems like it's a broad issue. However, if you actually get into it, there's so many aspects it affects, and I think that it will have very long-term effects as well on the education that Brugge provides.
And how do you guys navigate as part of the student councils these challenges and problems that, well, as you said, affect long-term and it's already affecting us right now? Do you guys like try to come up with like a plan, or do you guys just try to stick with what problems arise now and you try to solve from there?
I mean, a lot of these problems were anticipated. So, of course, the situation now is bad. However, it could have been worse, and if it wasn't anticipated, it could have definitely been worse. So I feel like the fact that they came up with a plan beforehand and tried adjusting how things are set up helped out in like how hard the budget cuts hit Brugge.
So we have seen like a lot of effects from this. So I have a question. Have you seen a concrete effects already? For example, like for international students, like specifically for international students, like what do they feel about it? Like from your protests, like have you heard what they have to say about it?
Well, of course, we have heard the perspective of quite a lot of people. International students in particular, they feel very much at risk with all the budget cuts happening,
Yeah.
but also the internationalization bills being proposed by the current cabinet. Um, they feel uncertain about the future. They're wondering whether they will be able to finish their degree. They wonder whether their friends that they might be younger or whether future people from their respective countries will be able to come here and have the same level of education that they were provided.
Yeah.
So this is something that for sure there is a big uncertainty about, and I think definitely as a university we can do better with communicating to let our international staff and students more at ease with. But also in regards to maybe concrete effects, I can say that we have already seen, for example, master programs being scrapped due to them not meeting certain amount of students because certain amounts of students need to be met in order for the course for the programs to be profitable. So some measures have already been kind of seen being implemented.
Okay, okay. And Maria, so in what ways are faculty and staff coping with the reduced resources?
Um, well, one thing that they're doing is they're definitely trying to restructure how they use the resources. There has also been a decrease in the employment of, for instance, like teachers or TAs, as I said, just
Yeah.
because they know that they can't afford it. There are also some initiatives in like how they manage the buildings because they know that they have to stick to a specific budget in order to be able to function properly. However, a lot of the time we also see that it comes with a lot of struggle, and sometimes the initiatives taken do not give as much like financial results as you would hope for. Yeah.
So for the both of you as a student council, so like how successful are you guys in giving the students a voice? How much say can you say in those internal meetings with like the university representatives and with all these important people?
Well, for one instance, there was a case in University Council recently where we brought up raising the amount of money given to co-participation bodies in Brugge, and despite there being budget cuts being implemented, we also saw that there's financial issues. However, so many students, so many talented students are putting work in, which also sometimes like puts a burden on the studies as you have to balance more things at the same time, and they are not being fairly compensated for their efforts. And we had a discussion about that, and in the end we ended up managing to raise the co-participation grant, just so that just so that the students are compensated, but also for co-participation to keep happening. Because if students see that they do all this work and in the end it doesn't really give them much effect, then there's less co-participation. If there's less co-participation, there's less representation of students.
Yeah.
By default, it's like it becomes a bit less democratic. And I think it's very important to have students involved in conversations like this, because sometimes on the university level you kind of forget the perspective of the person actually going to the university, and that's the perspective that student representatives offer. So that's one of the things we managed to do.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
As one of the people affected by this raise of grants to co-participation, I can definitely agree that a lot of time is being spent into it, and I would say all co-participation bodies right now have a bit of a problem in regards to finding new members. It is definitely very useful and has helped out.
All right. Yeah.
And maybe in what ways can students give their say on the matter, protest aside? Do they come to you as to student councils, or do they have their own platform to discuss?
Do you want to start on how it works on faculty level, and then I could?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even student representation actually has quite a lot of levels to it. So there exist year representatives, there exist program committees, the study association also offers space for people to voice their concerns. So definitely there's quite a lot of levels to it. On the faculty level, we are in constant communication with all of the program committees of our faculty, and we make sure that we hear their opinions as to what they think could be better within the faculty, and also their concerns in their individual programs. And the program committee members, of course, are elected. They are chosen for those positions, and it is their task to be in constant communication with the students of their respective study, so that way they can be as representative as possible, and they can make sure that within this bureaucratic system that the RUG has, they can voice their opinions further up.
And how smooth do you think sort of that process? Because you mentioned it's a bureaucratic process in RUG, and do you think it's easy for now for students to sort of appeal or give their
Realistically.
yeah?
Funny question. So I think it could be easier. I think talking from a perspective as a faculty council member in the arts, it could be easier. We have found many times that it is quite hard for these opinions to pass on because of other bodies set by the university having also a say this. Oh, I'm really
Don't worry,
sorry.
That's for
table.
the table.
Yeah. At times it can become difficult, and it has not helped us in the past to be able to raise certain concerns. So I would say it is good to a certain extent, but as anything within academia, it always has room for improvement.
I see.
All right, yeah. And for the both of you, if you could propose one policy change at the national level to safeguard higher education funding, what would it be and why?
Don't cut the funding. I mean, I think that would definitely be a thing. However, if I were to make it more specific, I unfortunately, from what I've seen, it seems that in this situation on the national level, it just look like, oh, universities get so much money, we should put it down. Like the amount of funding should be put down. However, because it's such a blanket approach, it creates so many issues, which is why we didn't even know what the exact criteria or like the budget cuts thresholds will be for so long, because all these issues started arising, and then they kept moving the decision deadline because they had to figure it out. So I understand that like there's you have to manage the money as a country, and it is a complicated issue. However, such a blanket solution does not work at all, and in the end it creates so many problems to the institution that the budget cuts are put on, which in the end will also affect the country on its own, because as we see now, people know about the budget cuts in the Netherlands. People see Groningen. People start saying, okay, I don't know what the situation or my diploma will look like in 3, 4, 5 years, so maybe I will try choosing another university in another country. And then so you have less students coming in, which in the end, the education level kind of becomes a bit more stagnant instead of continuously developing research, for instance. But also, because you have less students coming in, it becomes it can become a problem for a city like Groningen, where there's so many students that actually keep it up. So
Yeah. Would you like to add anything?
I think I would agree. If I could propose a plan on a national level, I would propose a long-term plan in regards to funding to universities, which is actually something that had happened in the past, and now with these budget cuts, that's also a reason why a lot of the universities are dissatisfied. A lot of the universities in the south had actually made adjustments to their education based on the funding that the previous cabinet had allocated to them and had said would be given. So a long-term plan on how the funding will be allocated would be something great. If I could add something else, however, I would perhaps make a policy that we have to do more in regards to international students,
Oh yeah, for sure.
or maybe student well-being. I think both are really important things that within the Netherlands right now often we disregard. In regards to international students, as we know, there is a new internationalization bill that currently threatens both our international students but also our international programs. So that would be something great. And the other thing is student well-being. As I think we have all seen, with the the Dutch academic year, no, Dutch academic programs only being 3 year long,
Yeah.
we do not get a lot of time off for ourselves. Summer breaks are not that long, and practically here in the University of Groningen, we don't get any time off in between blocks or in between
Yeah.
the semesters.
Yeah.
So that would definitely be something that I think would better help not only in student well-being and helping students not get burned out, so that means less students also drop
Yeah.
out, but I think that would also increase academic excellence and help research and students excel.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, what additionally makes this like a situation especially hard, and why it's I feel like better legislation would be better, is because, as Savas explained, all these are all important issues and they're all interconnected. So, like we see it now, there's budget cuts, and then everybody starts worrying about what will happen to international students, what will happen to the fees, what will we be able to obtain an English diploma in the university. So, you, like one idea like that's so blanket, it has a domino effect on like four
Yeah.
different aspects.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, like, looking ahead, what do you see as the worst case scenario? Because we want to anticipate, right? Like for Groningen specifically.
Doesn't have to be that bad.
Worst case scenario I can see is cutting of a lot of programs. So we would be seeing a lot of our current programs, specifically maybe the smaller ones, being cut or being downsized. I already know that some programs have possibly adjusted for cutting. If they have both a Dutch track and international one, they have adjusted for possibly cutting off the international one. But also for staff, primarily the people who would be at risk here would be young international staff who are in temporary contracts and can be let off a lot easier. So a lot of the budget, a lot of the programs being cut would be very bad, but also faculties being merged to save additional money would be another thing that I think would really put our education at risk, because we, as 11 faculties, we're all very diverse. We are very interdisciplinary, and I think that's a thing that we should really value. The reason that our faculties can excel is because they have their own little ecosystem. They are able to excel at what they do best. And if we make a very broad faculty, like a very broad humanities faculty, for that would very much damage interdisciplinarity, but also the possibility for deeper research in specific aspects of our society.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and with everything that's happened so far, and since you guys are the most involved in this issue, would you say that you guys are optimistic about whether this will be resolved in, say, like a year or so, or will it,
Okay,
or do you think it'll get much worse?
I'll say that I am glad that the university has been not agreeing to the budget cuts and has been voicing the concerns, and I am glad that we did get an exemption. However, just because we got an exemption doesn't mean that RUG will stay as it is, and it also doesn't mean there won't be backlash, because the budget cuts are still technically there; they're just lowered. And my biggest concern is whether international can continue obtaining an education here, and whether the independence that actually brought me to decide to come to RUG will be like basically sacrificed for the sake of having like larger faculties and like cutting down the budget costs. So I think this issue is, I know for sure this issue is still not solved. However, it has to be still monitored, and students should definitely keep voicing their concerns, whether it is in councils or in boards or in protests. This conversation has to keep happening, because if it doesn't, it is a very slippery slope for like all the negative effects that Savas here talked about a second ago to start happening.
And how effective do you think your efforts have been, and the efforts of students who go on marching on protests and appealing to board of examiners, or just venting online? How effective do you think it has been?
I think, well, for one, the protests were very effective. It created a movement that didn't only happen in Groningen, but it happened all around the Netherlands. And I think that such an initiative is massive, and it shows a clear disapproval of the approach, and it shows that the issue isn't just like a signed paper saying, "Oh, now you get less money." It affects
The
thousands and
livelihoods
thousands of people.
of international students
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. It's not just international students it affects. It affects Dutch students as well, because their programs are being cut as well. That it's one of the discussions in the law faculty. It's not like a sidelined issue that only affects internationals. No, it affects absolutely everybody. It affects the staff, no matter what nationality you're in. It affects like all of the student and the staff body. So, sorry, can you repeat your question?
You've already answered it.
Yeah, okay.
You said it was quite effective to march on
Yeah,
protests and so on.
Yeah. Oh, also another thing I want to say is, it is, in my opinion, it is also effective to keep mentioning it in council and keep advocating for it in council, because sometimes there's issues that like at first glance do not look like something that could be connected to budget cuts. However, if you advocate in a certain way, or if you propose a plan, or say a warning of like, oh, this could become like an issue, they do listen, and it helps out in balancing, especially in situations where students might notice something is going wrong, but other people might not.
I see.
So, yeah.
It's good to know.
Right. All right. As a final remark, Savas, so as a candidate of the Lijst Calimero, what are like the main issues, main priorities, and solutions that you have?
I would say that's a very interesting question, because there's many things right now to tackle at Terug. But if we're talking specifically, of course, to the budget cuts, but also internationalization bills, well, of course, we are against them, and we are planning on keeping against them. This year, Lijst Calimero voted against the proposed budgets due to the budgets being proposed, and I can say that the next faction of Lijst Calimero is prepared to do the same, because we believe that our education should not be compromised at all. But also in regards to many other aspects of the university that are at risk right now, we are talking about faculties merging. As a party, we care not only about the big faculties, but also the small ones.
Yeah.
They are very important to our education and for the university as a whole. As I said earlier, in regards to our research, in regards to the diverse ideas that we bring in, and how we progress. Because also, as was mentioned, I think by Maria, the thing about Dutch students being affected, the thing is that this is not something that just affects us as internationals. If the University of Groningen goes down in internationalization rankings, in world rankings, that affects all of our diplomas. That affects our future directly, and our employability chances for the future. Which is why also we want to implement more chances for better employability, because you are here at the end of the day to get a degree. You are here for your education, and of course you want to do everything else, but you should not be forced to do all these stuff just so you can have a chance to go out there in the market as a competent employee. So these are some of the things that of course we want to implement. I don't know if you have any more specific issue that you would like an answer on, maybe.
No, it's good for me. Do you want to ask anything?
No. I think it's quite broad on the topic you've touched. So
Yeah, I think it has been a really good discussion, and we've explored practical strategies for stretching limited resources, maintain team morale, and found opportunities even though like the budget's shrinking. And before we sign off, Maria and Savas, would you like to say any final words of encouragement maybe, or advice to anyone feeling the pressure of the budget cuts, to students or master students or staff members as well?
Yeah. One thing that I would say is an advice for students: make sure that you continue being involved in the updates made by faculty councils and university councils, because a lot of people are stressed about the budget cuts, but they also aren't always sure what is true, what is not, what is an assumption, because it's not clearly communicated by the university, which is a whole another problem. However, but then since it affects everybody, I feel like everybody becomes more uncertain. Then you have to adjust planning your future. However, in a lot of cases, you can also see our approach and what we're trying to do with it in either of the council levels. So I'd say definitely stay informed in the matters, and if you are, it is also great if you ever give us any feedback or concerns, because we also have meetings with board representatives and other students, and if you message us, we will answer. We've got multiple emails sometimes, and that's why we decided to do something in council in order to represent those associations. So definitely continue voicing your opinions and your concerns, and continue being informed, because the second we don't communicate with each other as students, and the second we give up, that's when the quality of the education we're getting drops instantly. So I think it is that's why it is very important to continue being updated, and you don't have to watch the whole council meeting. If you want, you're welcome to. However, if it lasts a couple hours, of course you don't have to, but we always post things on our Instagram, like the small updates. There's also always minutes that you can read, just so that you are able to know how your future is affected, because sometimes, unfortunately, it is really hard to reach people with information.
The correct information, especially. How about you, Savas?
If I could give any advice, I would agree totally that keep being informed, keep going out there, keep protesting, keep voicing your opinions. I come from Greece, a country that has faced many political and societal issues in the last couple of decades, and I have definitely seen how going out, voicing your opinions, participating in bodies like co-participation has helped a lot. And I have seen it recently in the Ruch, how it can really make a difference. So that would be definitely one of the things that I would advocate for. But also, I would say in general to the whole Ruch society, this is not the end. These budget cuts, these internationalization bills, this is not the end of the world. There's ways that we can fight them. There's things that we can do. So the best advice I would say is try to stay hopeful and try to fight as much as possible, so that together we can advocate for a better education and for a better future.
All right, sorry. One final thing. What message do you have to say for potential or prospective students who are planning to be enrolled here in RUG? Perhaps they're worried about all the things that we've talked about, and maybe they're now a bit unsure about their enrollment. What message do you have to?
I'd say definitely look at the policy the faculty are enrolling into is having, because I know, for instance, the law faculty was like, international European law has to be here. End of story. We're keeping the English top program. However, then in UMCG, for instance, the English top pharmacy core program, that one got closed down. So I think it is very useful to see how to research into how a certain faculty reacted to things, and also what the stance of the university is overall, because there are some that fought back against the budgets and some that instantly adjusted to it. So I think that is one thing that you should definitely look into. And if you have the opportunity, do contact people that you find online that you see maybe are active, because you can definitely look at the websites of boards or councils, and you see the representatives. You can always contact them and ask them what it's like, just to have a more an opinion from the inside.
I see. Savas, do you have anything to say?
I would agree. I would definitely agree. I think at the end of the day, of course, this university is really good. That's why we all chose to come here. But there are matters at hand that could perhaps turn someone away from the university. That could also affect your future and your education. So I would definitely research. I would stay informed in regards to what is happening, and then would make an educated choice on whether the University of Groningen is the right choice for you.
Oh, also, if I could add something, mm, a trend that because I'm Polish and I worked in a like an association, I guess, that helps students apply to universities abroad. And since the budget cuts came in, I've noticed that there was a significant decrease in the amount of students from Poland applying to the Netherlands, even though years prior the numbers were much, much higher. And the overall consensus was that they saw that there are budget cuts, they saw that there are issues regarding like how the university's futures lie on national politics, and they decided not to go just to stay safe. I understand that approach. However, also do deeper research and make sure you have the information from the right sources, and that you sometimes it can be also blown out of proportion a little bit. I'm not saying it's not a serious issue. However, make sure that you make an informed decision, not just on opinions, because I think that is also what affected it a bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right, thank you so much, Salvas and Maria, for all your insights. And I think it was really good. I think for also like future students coming to Groningen or wanting to study in Groningen, they can really learn from the information that you all share. So thank you everyone for listening to our podcast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you have any questions about budget cuts, you can just comment down below, and see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Thank you for having us.